next 5 seconds, we are now on live. We are live. So, Yemi, if you want to just introduce yourself, it's your session. I'm out of it. I'm one of those rare occasions when I'm not going to be saying anything up till you don't ask me to say something.
Okay, well, first of all, let me say thank you, Vikram, for this opportunity. I think it's a very great thing you've done. And I remember the first conversation that you and I had when I mentioned to you that, in my view, I didn't think mediation should be treated as alternative dispute resolution or even a means of dispute resolution only, but that mediation, or what I refer to rightly or wrongly as the mediatory mindset, should be encouraged as a culture. And I'm pleased to advise that, in fact, I'm getting a measure of success with one or two corporate organizations here who are willing for me to come in to work with them to see how to put in a mediation culture in their organizations, which affects everything: the working environment, the interpersonal relations, the disciplinary process, and so on and so forth. I've encouraged most of them to see the putting in place a mediation policy and culture within the organization with the same gravitas as the need to have a health, safety, and environmental policy and procedure in place in companies, which has become standard. But that said, going back to what we're speaking about today, which is mediation as a culture, let me say a few things about myself. I find it difficult to promote myself. I'm a mediator. I was called to the bar in Nigeria as a lawyer 45 years ago. I worked for the first few years in private legal practice in Nigeria and in the US. Then I joined ExxonMobil, as they used to be called just Mobil Oil Corporation, then before Exxon merged with Mobil Oil Corporation. And I was posted to the Nigerian affiliate, where I worked for 21 years until 2001. I retired. I went into legal practice as a private lawyer. I was mainly into commercial and business law, with a lot of focus on energy, natural resources. Around about 2012, 2014, I began to take an interest in developing a mediation practice, because I realized from some of my experience from my industry, from my work, we were encouraged. Mobil had a very litigation adverse policy, and the idea was, if you can settle. It's not worth going to court. In fact, I always remember that one of the first things I learned as a very young lawyer in the 1981 in the Mobil was how to carry out what is called a cost benefit analysis of any matter. And that cost benefit analysis was always the bedrock of most decisions to go to court. The only other thing, of course, was if there was something which the company felt we needed judicial pronouncement on, then we would go to court. But usually we didn't want to go to court. Secondly, we had, as you may be aware, oil companies operate in areas and where they have host communities. Again, Mobil had a very benign policy towards its communities, and it believed that unless it is absolutely necessary, it would not engage in any litigation or adverse action with its host communities. So I spent a lot of time in my career interacting with community leaders, negotiating agreements, negotiating disputes, listening to their complaints, and helping to negotiate between them and the company. And at that time, believe it or not, I didn't even know the word mediation. I didn't even see it as anything as conflict resolution. I saw it as just part of the work I was paid to do in the company. Years later, looking back, I realized that, in fact, that was introducing me to to negotiation and preparing me for what I'm doing today. So that's what I'm doing now. I've essentially toned down my main legal practice now, and I'm focusing almost exclusively on ADR, or what we call in the and but I don't do arbitration. I'm exclusively into mediation, and we recently set up something which we call the Dispute Solutions Hub, which is a mediation organization which will provide venues for private mediations, will provide developments of thoughts and learnings in mediation. We always having a focus on mediation, and hopefully next month, for example, we're beginning something called the Learning Lab, where on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, people can come together and share ideas and grow the knowledge of mediation. So that's where I am. That's what I'm doing. That's a fairly long-winded introduction, but I hope that helps you to understand who I am. Once again, thank you, Vikram. And to the topic of today, I battled in my mind how to approach this. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll be open to questions and discussions and thoughts. Now, one of the things that I have about mediation is that oftentimes we look at mediation as just a contrast to what we call the adversarial approach to conflict resolution. Now, an adversarial approach to conflict sees resolution as a prize. We need to understand that. An adversarial approach to conflict sees resolution as a prize. And the negotiation and the process toward attaining it is actually seen as a combat. It's like a boxing match, a wrestling match. So the tougher and more aggressive negotiator wins. And the more conciliatory one often loses. In fact, some of us in law practice, I don't know in other countries, but in Nigeria, sometimes when clients have come to you, I know a particular client of mine who says to me all the time, "You are too soft. You are too soft. I think you need to be harder on them." And somehow it seems as if clients expect that if you are tough and you shout and you're aggressive, that is what makes you a good lawyer. Yes, I will get my lawyer to go after you. That is a typical attitude. But the thing is that the adversarial approach itself lends itself to competition between the negotiators. And this is where we find the problem with that system, because it becomes a competition between the negotiators, because it becomes a competition between the advocates. Oftentimes, it becomes their battle rather than the battle of the actual parties who are forced essentially now to take a back seat. According to the Oxford Dictionary, it is characterized by conflict or opposition because this is necessary. If you watch World Wrestling Federation on TV sometimes, which I love to watch, you find that one of the things that parties love to do is to threaten one another and to make faces. You need to get that aggression. And I say to myself many times when I watch them, and that's the reason I like watching it, by the way, and I go to the courtroom, I just sit down at the back. And in my heart, I'm laughing. And people see me putting a smile. They don't know why I'm laughing. I see the lawyers. I just see them. I say to myself, World Wrestling Federation. This is a combat going on here. But I want to say this, that this is not the only conflict. This is not the only distinction between mediation, although there's a tendency for us to feel so. And this is where we're coming from. And I want to say this, that not every non-adversarial method can be called mediation. And I'm saying this as an introduction to where I'm going, because most times, for those of us, especially in the African continent, We always say, oh, we've always had mediation in our culture, we've always had mediation in our society, and some who are Christian or religious will say, oh, it even goes back. Remember the story of Solomon and the two women whose babies died, and so on and so forth. And I say to them, those methods are non-adversarial, but it is not every non-adversarial method that can be called mediation. So what I'm saying on the onset is that, as a matter of fact, I have been wondering whether in fact we have mediation in our culture as such. We have means of settling disputes. We have conciliation, we have reconciliation, we have peacemaking, we have bridge building, we have relationship repair. All these things feature in mediation as well, but not every one of those things amount to mediation. And the first thing I want to say, almost as a thesis, Vikram, is that mediation is unique. It is unique. And it is distinguished from other forms of conflict resolution in that mediation, actually, number one, submission to mediation is voluntary. There may be few or no other options, but still it is voluntary. I find that even in situations where courts order mediation, the parties still reserve the right to go back to the court and to move a motion to say they do not want to do mediation. There may be consequences, but it remains largely voluntary. Now, in our culture, in our community, when the elders send for you because there's a dispute, it is not voluntary. You must come. Obedience is mandatory. So it is not voluntary. Secondly, the responsibility in mediation for a successful outcome always resides in the parties. It always resides in the parties. That responsibility and the relevant power is not and has not been delegated, or even in some instances abdicated, to a third party. There is no judgment. There is no decision of a third party. Mediation is not merely conciliatory. It is essentially and fundamentally consensual. Those are the elements which I believe must be present for us to say that a mediation is taking place. It must be voluntary. It must be, the parties must own the process of and the procedure toward their resolution, and they will not be depending on the judgment or the decision or the direction of a third party. Anything less than that is similar to mediation, is akin to mediation. But I want to say, with all due respect, it is not mediation. And as we're trying to develop the culture of mediation, it is important to know, therefore, that it is a new thing. In sense, it is evolution. It is moving forward from all these other systems which are in our various cultures and traditions. And with that background, I'll say this, that in our culture, and please, in case there are people who know about other African tribes or ethnic groups, let me say from the onset, I don't have a general competence to speak for the African continent. I don't even think I'm competent to speak for Nigeria. I am Yoruba from the southwestern part of Nigeria, and I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of my culture. That is where I come from, not as an African, not as a Nigerian, but as a Yoruba person from the southwestern part of Nigeria. Now, You know what I said about mediation, and the first thing I want to point out is that there is a slight difference between what I've said and what obtains in our traditional systems, where parties submit to the elders or to the ruler or the chief or the king or a panel of persons who are set up to look into the matter. I have the privilege of having been born to the firstborn of a traditional ruler in my hometown. My grandfather, my late grandfather, was the Oba or the king of the community. And even as a young person, when we went to spend, it was customary for us to spend the Christmas and New Year with him at the palace. And I used to enjoy sitting around and watching him hold court from early in the morning till today. The remembrance of it fascinates me. He just sat down there, and people came in one after the other, prostrated or knelt or cuts or whatever it is, and they gave their story. This person has done this, done this, and he listened to them, and he said, yes, this was this. He listens to them, and then sometimes he may turn to some of his chiefs sitting to his left or right and ask an opinion, and he'll give directions. Go and do that. Go and give him back his goat. You took 2 goats, give him back 3 goats. You shouldn't do that. And next, these things were done. And this is where I say that it isn't mediation. It isn't even conciliation. It's actually a court. It's actually a litigation minus the combat, minus the arguing counsels who are fighting, minus the adversity or adversariality which is present, but it is not mediation. And this is also replicated because when people have not come to the palace of the king, sometimes especially in domestic problems, what happened would be a convening of a council of elders. And again, they would listen to the parties and they would make determinations in the form of counsel. Well, we suggest you go and do this. Look, you two should do this. Look, remember this, and so on and so forth. But do not be deceived. The decision of the forum is binding and will be enforced. Even though such enforcement may not necessarily be done because parties will voluntarily comply, but don't be left in any doubt. If you don't comply, there are consequences. A person who refuses to be guided by the elders or to submit to the authority of the king would be ostracized in the society. And in some cases, there's outright exile. So hanging at the back of you is something that compels you to comply. Now, again, I'm saying this, is this mediation? No. Is it litigation? No. It tells me that we have moved, litigation is a striving to maybe to the left or to the right, you want to put it. What we do is in the middle, and mediation is a branching off, whether to the left or the right, depending on where you start from, and it's a new development. Now, in our culture, where this, what I call our dispute resolution culture, one of the things that is important is that there is a grounding norm, which is akin to what we today refer to as NVC, or nonviolent communication. In those processes where people come before the elders or before the ruler, the conversation, the dialogue are replete with ancient proverbs and anecdotes which allow the listener to self-adjudge without having to endure the stigma of direct indictments. And that is what I always find interesting, whether they are before the ruler or before the elders. A lot of the times, a person makes a complaint. Let me give one of the easiest ones. There's a proverb, I'll translate it. And they say, when the man has given a story, the elders say, well, you know, they say that if you suddenly see an old man running carelessly amongst a bush of thorns, surely if he's not going after something urgently, then something's running after him. You know, those things. And the other person then says there, but then if this is, he also replies in a proverb. But you see, one of the advantages of the proverbs is that they have the ability, they allow the parties to speak beyond their feelings, beyond their thoughts, and the actions of both speakers and listeners, they are able to do so in a safe, non-threatening way. There's something about the proverbs in the way they've embodied a lot of the values and cultures of the people that it enables them to avoid the tensions and the animosity, the violence that is common to most dispute and conflict situations. Now, our proverbs, they convey wisdom, truth, a discovery of ideas, as well as life lessons and non-aggressive functions. The ancients, our people, amongst the Yorubas, they use them to deal with difficult communications and situations. I was intervening yesterday, for example, with a court bailiff who had gone to execute a court order which I think was wrongly granted. And I intervened and I called him up and he said to me, look, excuse me, sir, I'm only doing my work. I'm not a lawyer. I have a warrant of execution here and I've been asked to execute. And it's not my place to start thinking about it. I said to him on the phone in the Yoruba language, I said to him, but you know very well that even if they sent you on an errand like a slave, you would not behave like a slave, you would behave like a son. And that calmed the tension immediately. I wish I could speak it in Yoruba. Vikram always likes to hear that. If they send me on an errand, the errand of a slave, I will carry it out like a son of the house. And that appeals to him in a way that I can't really explain or express. It helps him to understand that. Call the use of probes, or if you like, a politeness or peace maintaining strategy. And they thus served as effective guardrails in those processes. They served as effective guardrails even beyond conflict situations. They are effective guardrails in even other relationship protocols. They were the language of the court. Now, I've gone to town a little bit of this because three things are present. There's active listening, because you have to listen. And you have to hear. Because most times when the proverbs are given in our language, you never complete it. If a proverb has 12 words, you only say the first 5 words. Because the culture of the people is that if you are a well brought up person, we only need to tell you a little bit. When you hear it, the rest will come from within you. So there is a need for active listening. Number 2, there is a need for reframing. You cannot be violent. You cannot do things. There is a need to understand that it is not, you are not the only, let me put it literally, you are not the only one. Now, you may not quite get the implication of that, but in my language, say, hey, you are not the only one. You are not the only one. It means something much more than perhaps you might put to it. And they're saying to you, you have to think beyond yourself, even in finding an answer to your own claim. So in all of these things, you'll find that all these elements of mediation, are actually present in our culture. And this is the way, this is what I'll say prepares us, or as makes mediation very suitable. It will be a natural move forward of our society into what I'd call the contemporary times. But again, I say, like I said at the beginning, what we are doing now, where we are now, is not strictly mediation. It's very close to mediation. It shares many things in common, especially some of these things I've mentioned now: active listening, reframing, empathy, non-violence, understand that it is not only you. So learning to consider the interest of the other party, learning to balance that with your interest. All these things are what I call elements of mediation, which are present in that process. But I say this, that that process is not mediation. Now, I'll go on and quickly talk about something else, which also is at the background of that. In the Yoruba language, there's an expression which we call omoluabi. Now, omoluabi, Omoluabi. I'll explain it in full as we go forward. We're speaking culture here. Now, the omoluabi is a Yoruba philosophical let me put it this way, although it would not do full justice to it, a person of good character. But it goes a little bit beyond that, because it emphasizes particular characteristics that have to be present: courage, hard work, humility, and respect. Which is the reason why when persons come before a panel of elders, or they come before the king, or they come before the members of the family, humility, respect. We are very, as a people, Yorubas especially, are very respectful of elders. Let me put a little relief here. I had an experience when I went to work on the foreign lawyers program with Sullivan and Cromwell. That's when I worked with the law firm in New York. And I came in, I'm the Nigerian boy, straight out of Nigeria, 1 year in London at the London School of Economics. And everybody's calling themselves, hey Benjamin, hi John, hi William. And I couldn't call the senior partners in front of me. No, I'm not going to call him William. No, I can't. I just can't. It can't come out of my mouth. I can't do it. So he calls me to his room one day and say, hey, Yemi, here we go by first names. And I want you to get used to that, okay? You call me William, whatever it is. I looked at him and I smiled. I said, sir, that's a tall order for me. You see, I said, where I'm coming from, I cannot call someone who is old enough to be my father by his first name. So, sir, I'm sorry, sir, you are going to get used to my not calling you by your first name. I cannot. You know, and these are the things that are part of our culture. Little children are walking along the street. Although I must tell you that Nigerian, what I'll call our cosmopolitan areas are becoming very westernized these days. But in those days, I could stop a group of young children going to school on their way to school, call them and correct them. Maybe they're playing around the street and say, hey, get on home. And they would obey me. I'm not going to be afraid that they'll attack me. I could walk into a group of little children and they would stand, but they will stop what they're doing. They will greet me and they will respect me. Those things are part of the qualities of our culture, and these things are part of what make the 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 dispute resolution process work, because once the parties come there and the elders are sitting there, first of all, there's a lot of humility before them. There's a lot of respect for them. There's you can make all the noise. In fact, as little children, where we would do things that were mischievous to one another, all I needed to do was to run, and if I saw an elder, I'll go stand next to the elder, and the other person could not do anything to me while I stood next to the elder person. It protected me. And that that element, you wouldn't believe it, it's extended even to the dispute resolution process. Because once you come into that place, when they come before that panel, it's not the same feeling you get when you go into a court of law. People may fear the judge, but they don't have the same respect and reverence of him as they have for that elder who calls them and says, yeah, me, yeah, me, yeah, me, your wife says you are doing this, and all you can first of all say is that, I'm sorry, sir. That's the first thing. That's where you start. And you see, those things are an expression of the values and ethics of the culture. Now, they are very conducive. They are very helpful to have in the context of a mediation process. But again, I'll keep emphasizing that process, however, is not mediation, but that underlying quality, those values are there, that you can intervene, you can say this. People can say, well, I'm going to tell Auntie Jane about you, and that's just to keep you quiet and keep you in control. So I'm sure you want me to explain to you what omoluabi is, and I'll explain that in detail. Now, omoluabi, I'll break it up. Omo means child. Omo, child. Ti oluwabi, Oluwa is God, or in this case is Oluwa, the deity or divinity that embodies all the virtues and values and goodness of which the culture identifies. So a child that is begotten of that God is an omoluabi, is a child of noble pedigree, a child of impeccable character. He demonstrates certain attributes in his speech. Again, you'll notice in mediation we encourage people to speak civilly. We encourage them not to raise their voice. We encourage them not to be violent. We encourage them not to go out of order. So respect, goodwill, truthfulness. Now that's very important. In litigation, parties hide under the technical rules of evidence. And even when they know something is true or available, if the technical rules of evidence can allow them to make it inadmissible and therefore unavailable, they will do so. You cannot do that in the customary processes of resolution. They expect you that if there is anything that is true, you must declare it and you must own up to it. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we are 100% saints. I'm telling you what the ideals are, okay? Those are the ideals. Sometimes we all depart from the ideals, okay? But that is the ideal thing. We expect you to stay by the truth. Truthfulness is something that people understand. In fact, learning to be tactful. You won't believe it. The tribe is called Yoruba. But the word in that language for diplomacy, for tact, for tactfulness is Yoruba. So it is part of the fundamental characteristic of the people. bravery, intelligence. Now, if you look at all of this, they form the bedrock of the qualities that are in the background, and therefore, when these qualities, these virtues, these principles are they are internalized, they are respected, they're expressed, they enable the dispute resolution or the conflict resolution process to work, because everybody essentially, at least ideally, subscribes to those principles and values, and therefore um, it is easy to resolve. But let me close by saying this: that essentially what I'm saying on the on this is that, do we have mediation in our culture? No, that is my thesis. However, is our culture amenable or conducive or inclined to mediation? Yes. I think mediation is a natural next level of from where we are. And like I said at the beginning, it's important to understand that the major thing about mediation is that submission to it is voluntary, and the responsibility for its outcome resides in the parties. So that, in a nutshell, Vikram, explains how we have or perhaps do not have, or how we may be inclined or predisposed to mediation in our culture. I'd like to hold my peace there in case there are any questions or things. Thank you very much.
Pleasure listening to you always. Your style of talking, can I get it? No, I can't get it, but I love to listen to it. But one important thing that I wanted to bring out from that, I mean, you'll have to tell us more about it. But when you say social pressure, because I see social pressure playing a major part in dispute resolution, you don't want to call it mediation. So, do you think when we say social pressure, should we take it out of mediation if the person has done it because of social pressure?
No, I would say that we shouldn't take it out, but it is a useful thing to rely on.
Yeah,
It's useful. It's useful.
because when I go to
I wouldn't take it out. I wouldn't make it essential to it, but it's a good thing to have.
yeah, because I'm just thinking that in the Singapore Convention, when it says that the person should not have the authority to impose a decision, but like I said, the social context, in that context, if the person is in some way,
Give me a
yeah,
second, please.
yeah, yeah, please, please.
I'm getting. Okay, please go on. Yes.
So I'm just thinking that the social context, I think maybe we should not totally go out of it. Just to say that the dispute resolution should be totally something where the parties should not have anything imposed on them. Sometimes I feel maybe social pressure is a good thing because communities are maybe moving away from that, and maybe that's not been good for dispute resolution. Because before I don't know, before you came, maybe I was talking to Adi about that. That maybe India has something right going for it with 60% rural population. We only have 18 million cases going into courts, while when I do a research on the US situation, it might be I get 100 million sometimes in one search, or I get 40 million also. I mean, whatever, but still it's a huge number. I mean, in terms of the population. So maybe there's something right there, and maybe should we be in some way changing it, or not accepting it, or not continuing it?
You're right. I'll tell you one thing. When you say social pressure, I don't know whether I should call it pressure or not. I'm not sure. Um, I said to you, for example, when, and please, I do not mean any disrespect uh, to the President of the United States of America, but there was a lot of controversy around when he went to meet the Queen. He just didn't seem to be able to get the right protocol. He wasn't intentionally rude. I would say, in my language, without any disrespect to him, he did not know. Again, when I say he did not know, if I say he did not know to a Yoruba person, it carries a lot more weight. He did not know. Didn't you know? He should know. You know, this is the thing about culture here. Um, if I have a problem with my business partner, my society expects that I should report him. Again, I use the word report advisedly here. There should be somebody I can call upon who would respect him. Even in my family, for example, my family was like a family council. You have a problem every Sunday for a long time growing up. It was up to, and when I say growing up, I mean till I was in my mid 30s. There was a tradition every Sunday after church service to meet at home in my father's house and to sit around his dining table and to all have a meal between 12 and 2. And at that meal with my father and my mother present, you brought up your complaints. This is what my sister is doing. Okay? There was always, you see, that is always present, and that by extension is in the society as well. And that is why one of the things that I believe that colonialism or the influence of colonial power on us did to us is to replace such things with a court system. But underneath the court system, people still have a lot more respect for those social institutions. And so I believe that if there's a way that we could use the law to bring them back, which is what is happening now by the encouraging of mediation in our society here, that people are getting back to, okay, fine, listen. And that's why, for example, not that a 20-year-old could not be a good mediator, but you'll find that at least in this part of the world, you're likely to be more effective as a mediator when the parties who come in are either younger than you or they're not much younger than you or not much older than you are. But especially if they are younger than you are, beyond whatever skills you may have as a mediator, they listen to you, they respect you, because that is what their society, that is what their culture has trained them to be. And that's what makes you think. That's part of what helps you to be effective as a mediator. That is why a 55-year-old mediator is likely to be more effective than a 25-year-old mediator, even if the 25-year-old mediator has all the skills, has all the degrees from Cambridge, Harvard, and Stanford. You see what I'm saying? So that's part of that. That's part of that social pressure. It's always there. It's advisable, and I believe that it should never be taken away.
And but like you said, that we have to go back to what we had and that kind of a structure. But you're saying through law. I mean, in terms of the countries are trying to get law, like India is trying to put a law together, which according to me might just finish that off, because whenever you come out with a law and you want to regulate something, which is in a country like ours, definitely with such a huge country, you to even regulate something which is down there at the village level. And I mean, there was a conversation with someone who was part of the committee which was recommending this, was saying, let them do it. If they're doing it free, let them do it. And I'm on the other side. I'm saying these are the people whom we have to bring out, and they have to be paid, and they have to take it as a profession and take it forward. So I'm saying that do we need to really regulate it? And how do we develop it at the grassroots level, at the village level, at the, I mean, whatever the tribe or clan or whatever it might be? How do we do that?
By a process, I want to suggest that we need to do a lot more of encoding rather than legislating. I think we need to go out in making law, in investigating what happens and how it is done, and then encoding it, rather than bringing a law, legislating and say, well, this is the way to do it.
But that interestingly, I'm telling you that I asked someone to go into some villages, and just wanting to find out, are there people, because I've always been talking about identifying those with the mediator mindset, and you'll be so surprised that just the first conversation and he had already identified those people, that these are the people in that village, these are the, and he had names. So I'm saying this is the identification is all there, to be able to make it a profession for them, to be able for them to, because they're providing a service which is invaluable. And that is what I'm saying. Maybe that is why we don't have that caseload, that the way in a large country like that we could have had. But interestingly, you brought out colonization, and right, I will have a session at the end of the month, end of September, only on colonization and mediation in our culture and traditions, and you have to be part of that. See, well, let's see. Let's just discuss it. I mean, it's just a
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah. But let me say this. You mentioned something. Those persons who were identified, they can be encouraged. But what I'm saying is, what is in the culture, what is inherent in them, what is slightly different from mediation. This is where you have to gently and carefully lead them into lead them into a lead them into a, a let me say a move forward in the local cultures, and this seems to be called common to all of them, is that the peacemaker is a peacemaker. Now, a mediator is really supposed to be someone who essentially, not that he makes peace, but that rather he he creates an enabling environment for peace. And those persons whom you mentioned, who have the mindset, they have the potential. You need to then groom them and move them. You see, because they already have that mindset, they will be more predisposed to moving to what I'd call genuine mediation. Because I believe that mediation is not mediation unless, and this is my thesis. I don't take this as authority. Is what I think, that mediation. If I'm going to call something mediation, then, like I said, the the parties must must be responsible for the eventual outcome of their dispute. They must be responsible. The power must never be delegated to the third party,
Yeah.
because it is that ability to own it that makes them more inclined to enforce and to abide by it. See that
Yeah.
so
So
it's
basically,
a step forward.
yeah.
Yes.
So basically, what you're saying is, one, that they, of course, these people have that trust in the community trusts them to resolve the disputes, but they should move to a more purer form of mediation, because as society has developed, that might not be acceptable to a lot of people. So you have to change with the times, and you have to give the parties that, at least that power to finally do what they want to do. Something like that.
Exactly.
Something
Yeah,
like
you have to help them to find it. Like we would say in my part of the world, correct.
that. But interestingly, Isaac from Ghana, he did a little bit of research. He actually had sent out a form, and he'd asked people for information on in the culture and tradition. So you, from the Yoruba part of it, he had come out with the Bale system. Have you heard of the Bale? So what is the Bale system?
Ballet sister, the ballet is the father in the land, a father in the land. That's the transliteration of the word ballet. Now, I told you my grandfather was an Oba. The Oba is a higher kind, is more like a king, whereas the ballet is like a duke. If Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the case. So the and it's the same kind of system I was referring to, where you have the king or the Oba holding court. So that is there. That is still there. But you see, the king or the Oba or the Bale or whoever it is or the elder is still the one who is making a balanced decision. is making a conciliatory decision. He's even making a compromissory recommendation or a recommendation for compromise. But the bottom line is he is still making a decision. What and that is how it is in our culture and in most cultures. What I'm advocating, Vikram, is that in developing a mediation mindset is that our work is not just to recognize these systems and try to conform to them, but rather to recognize them and see this as an opportunity now to move them, if I may quote you, into the purer form of mediation.
I understand. Actually, I got the point. I totally understand what you're saying. But the point is that to explain that to people, we have to be able to relate it to what they already know and then tell
Yes,
them that this is something which obviously has a more kind of a decision making, but you have to move more towards the aspect of them taking the decision themselves, something like that.
perfect.
Yeah. But
Absolutely.
but the
Yes.
other thing he also came out with, I mean, the Agba is the same. I mean, what is that?
Elder, elder,
Same thing. I mean, similar. It'll be all similar.
elder, yes, elder,
Yeah.
yes.
So it'll be so. And the
Agba is elder, elder.
then you had the chiefs, what Audicrow
Yeah,
or Audicrows, and also. So at all
yeah.
points of time, you're saying that all the same method was the way they went about it, but only thing he had heard was that within the chiefs, between them, they did mediation. So at that level, when you've gone through all the layers, at that level, they are doing mediation within themselves to whatever come up to whatever decisions they have.
It's more like you see it. Yeah, I agree with that, and so it tells you that actually it's inherent there. And you know what you are recognizing there is the fact. You know, I told you the younger respects the elder, the lower respects the higher. Now at that level, because they're equal, there is no one to give power to. Now we're saying that you want to translate that to the rest of the society, but you also want to be able to practice that in a way that says to them, the fact that I am not taking a decision does not mean that I have abdicated my role. It does not mean I'm no longer in the stature that I am, but I'm saying that you are better off if you come to your own decision. And I believe the challenge that I always face, and I know many mediators face this, especially when you're dealing with even commercial transactions, even between big businesses. I was dealing with two major oil service companies in Nigeria recently. And it's amazing how many times, especially the private caucus, the parties will say to me, you tell us. You've been in the industry. What do you think we should do? How do you think we should resolve this? You know this. I remember we used to do work for your company. You know that well, how would you do this? And I would say to them, I really am not in a position to tell you what to do. You have to decide what to do. It is your matter. It's not my job to advise or counsel you. It is not my advice. It is not my job to make a decision for you. Even at that level, people still always want to quickly delegate that responsibility to somebody else, so that in their mind, I believe, if something goes wrong, they can blame you for it. He made us do it. Like we say, the typical thank you. The typical story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The wife you gave me. It's the wife that you gave me. You gave me the wife.
But I think interestingly, the fact is that I don't know whether you remember months back we had a discussion on why do people want to go for arbitration or litigation, and this is exactly what we had discussed. Some people just want someone else to take the decision and blame it on them.
Exactly.
But yeah, but I
So
yeah.
mediation actually encourages us to assume a higher level of responsibility. That's all.
Yeah. So I think maybe what is really saying is that as society has developed, that whole concept of being equals, that should have developed or should develop. And when you're equals, in any case, you are going to be doing it at whatever you want to do, but someone can suggest. So I think the key word is to be able to use language where people do not think there's an imposition. So the mediator can suggest, but you have to take the decision. And to be able to say that that suggestion doesn't come, what you're saying, doesn't come with social pressure. That suggestion is just a suggestion.
Yes, and you see, this is where, if you go back to what I was saying about where the benefit of our use of proverbs comes in. You see, the person doesn't feel pressured, but like I gave you the story of the bailiff, the sheriff who was executing, and all I just said to him was not, according to section 5, subsection 2 of your this, you don't have the power to do this, or I have the right under this law to. It didn't. I didn't have to do that. I just said something to him in the language that you are behaving like a slave when you should be behaving like a son. That, if I said that to you, maybe it wouldn't have the same impact. But it hit him and it made him recoil. You see, it made him recoil. It hits him immediately. This is the thing that we're saying about mediation. The entire culture of mediation is not just something that we begin in a 5 days session from Monday to Friday, but it's something which we have to work on and develop over time. Just like even a good advocate or a good barrister has to hone the skills over time, a good mediator also has to build up those skills and its tools over a period of time.
But I mean, we had discussed earlier also that you are going to put out these proverbs in on whatever your blog or whatever every day, one per day. Please do that. We need those out there. Everyone should be able to relate to them. I'll just show you this person that the Isaac from the Ghana is actually put out. Let me show you some of them. You'll relate to them because Yoruba is from the Yoruba land. So have a look at this. Can you see this?
Yes.
Is this something which comes from there? I'm just saying he's put some out. How much of it is going to be looked at here? But I really liked some of them.
I can relate to some of them. Yes. There is no permanent hostility in friendship. Yes. Now, these proverbs are proverbs that, when said to people who understand them or who can relate to them, resonates within them and conditions them toward consensus. Because then the proverbs talk to me inside me. I'm speaking Nigerian English now. Okay, the the proverbs speak to me inside me. Okay, and because they speak inside me and they have a voice inside me, I don't need an outside voice to tell me. And because I don't have an outside voice to tell me, and nobody else is hearing the inside voice, I'm able to speak as though I did hear any voice. And so my ego is protected. I save face. I don't have to feel that I was commanded or compelled or instructed. And sometimes the reason why people are in conflict or get into dispute is, oh, do you know who I am? How dare you? How could you do that to me? And many times, many disputes and conflicts, even political conflicts between countries, are ego driven. They are personal conflicts, disrespect of one party to the other. How could you talk to me like that? In our part of the world, whole tribes have gone to war because you disrespected someone in their community. So those are the kind of things that proverbs help us to deal with, and that is why understanding them and using them, even as part of the what I call the toolkit of a mediator in this part of the world, is essential. And again, going back to what I call thesis of developing a mediation culture. These are the elements that we have to build up that would, and mastering them will be part of becoming masterful in mediation. Just like in the Western world, mastering the skills of negotiation is seen as part of the toolkit of an effective mediator.
Well, but tell me, because proverbs I'm very interested in, but the ones, do you think in Ghana what they have and what I mean, because he picked up something from Twi. Twi is one, they're also a clan, tribe, whatever it is.
Yes, it's a
So the nice ones they had. I mean, they were nice. I really liked them.
yeah.
I like this one about the fact of blowing the dust off my eyes. That's why two antelopes walk together. But do you relate to this? I mean, do you have similar things there?
Oh yes, they don't, they're not exactly the same words, but they're very similar. They're very similar. And,
Basically, concept being that you some basic things you explain to people. I was telling you about that father, son, and the donkey story, which is repeated everywhere. So I think one little story gives you so much. I mean, I think that is what is required. That these doses of things, even mediation, attempting at some stage, I mean, I'm trying to develop this, that we can put out in a basic story, which start with children, they can relate to, and the older people can also relate to the same story. Everyone relates to it. I mean, it's not that you can be it can be an animation, but everyone will be able to relate it. So some putting something out, let's see. So basically, it's always nice talking to you. And but are we reaching a level where in Nigeria someone can be a pure only a mediator and do nothing else? It's happening.
I believe so. Not how can I don't want to say no, but I'll say yes. Because the reason I say yes is because, fortunately, the court system is frustrating people, both in terms of expense and time, and even outcome. Arbitration, which used to be the quick go-to, has become in some cases even more technical. It's taking just as much time and it's costing even more. Good news, mediation. I've also encouraged some of my friends who, like me, are trying to face mediation exclusively and full time. I say, well, let's not make it expensive. Because when we make it expensive, we are essentially shooting ourselves in the foot. Because what we're saying is we are inexpensive. Now, I didn't say we're cheap, but I'm saying we're inexpensive, we're cost effective. Number two, I have been battling in this area here. Every place where I've had an opportunity to have a voice, I have discouraged attempts to bring in too many technical rules into mediation. Because once you do that, you need people to interpret it, and then they begin to work technicalities. And hey, 10 years, 15 years from today, we are back where arbitration has come to. So those two things, let's keep it not technical. Let's keep it untechnical. Number two, let's keep it inexpensive. Let's make it swift. That way, and once that is done, I believe that gradually mediation will become the the norm, because people need it. We can't afford to hold up business for 5 years. I mean, I had a case. We were in court from 1989, 1990, and only got judgment in 2008. And as long as we got judgment, the other side went on appeal. And we were in for another few years before it was finally out of the courts. In between, one or two of the parties actually passed on. One or two of the lawyers passed. I mean, you can't go on a case from 1990 to 2008. I mean, for crying out loud, that is 18 years.
That's what you heard me. Some of these sessions I've said that courts should put a warning outside. Justice is denied here, because justice delayed is justice denied. Warning, please do not enter. Enter at your own risk.
Enter at your risk, exactly. And I think that provides a perfect opportunity for us to encourage people to embrace mediation. There'll still be a place for the law courts, and I believe that that place will make them more effective in what they ought to be doing.
Exactly. The judgments that need to come out, the quality of judgments that need to come out, the constitutional aspect need to be interpreted. Let them
Exactly.
concentrate on the bigger
On
issue.
those, but exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I'm just saying there is a lot of work out there, so much work. I mean, it's so much work that the mediators, as the people who still call themselves mediators, I'm still saying the mediator mindset has to come out. That is still out there. We have to identify, but there's so much work there. Not a problem. People understand it. They will value it also. But I think that the court system and those people who are doing that, I think Nigeria, I was told you get $40 if you for the entire process, whatever time it takes, doesn't matter. So in those kind of situations, actually they're whatever they're doing, there are people like us who are only practicing as mediators, they're doing us a disservice by doing that. I mean, I would tell the mediators there also that if you, this is my livelihood that you are doing as kind of pro bono. So I think we need to send that message out also.
We certainly do, because you see, when payments to mediators is so low, you also influence the quality of mediators. So we now finding that balance is what some of us are beginning to work on. We have a society of professionals in conflict resolution, which is the process of trying to look for that balance, so that people can come in. We don't want to make it entirely pro bono, but there are many things people pay for. There are many things people pay for. I mean, people pay for their cell phones. They pay for their data time and so on and so forth. And when you look at how much they pay for this on a weekly, monthly, annual basis, is a lot more than you're asking them to pay to find peace.
Exactly.
So it's a matter of educating people as well
Yeah.
to
But
understand what the value is. What I've
exactly.
often said in trainings I've done, there's I introduced when in trainings for mediation advocacy. One of the things that I introduced um, on my own is what I call the mediation value chain, identifying the mediation value chain. I've said to many lawyers that you tend to look at mediation from a litigation or arbitration value chain, and therefore we can't get the best of it. Mediation has its own value chain. Once you can identify that, it can be worthwhile for you. You can price effectively without pricing out of the market,
Yeah.
and it can be worthwhile for you.
I think the important thing is for people to taste it. And to
Yes.
taste it, you have to break the chicken and the egg situation. So I don't know, at the grassroots level, is there some activity there in terms of community mediation or anything else? Is there something happening at that level?
Not too much yet, but we're trying to encourage it. I've been banging at several doors at different times, and
Right.
the closest I got to that was when in Lagos State we had some conflict between the government and the motorbike riders, the Gokada people, and things like that. Unfortunately, I'd actually suggested a town hall to carry out effectively what I suggested would be a multiple party conflict resolution process. And then came COVID-19 lockdown, and we couldn't have large meetings. But yes, we're knocking on doors. We're trying to encourage this to become a part. And I mentioned at the beginning that I'm talking to one or two companies, and have been very encouraged. In fact, I'm having a conversation with one this week who are willing to let me come in with my team and work with them to developing a mediation culture for the company.
Perfect. And that's the way
And
to go about it. Yeah.
yeah,
But like I said, if they taste it at the community level and they know what it's about, so these are the people who go into workplaces. They're the ones who are into businesses. I mean, it all comes from the community. They're not people alien to
exactly,
the community. They're out there. So if they practice it there, they'll take it forward. But what I
exactly.
understand, what I realize is that you are short of time. and you want to
Yes.
leave and you're being polite. You don't have to be polite. I totally
Yes. Okay.
understand. So thank you
Yeah.
very much. It was wonderful to have you. Always it is. And we'll continue conversations. And if Giovanni wants to say bye to you, let him just give a. Giovanni is a very enthusiastic person. He's been on through all sessions. So just Giovanni.
Adeyemi, just for joking, in a court, you will be a wonderful lawyer because because your speech is so clear, so involving. Also, so your meditation.
Thank you very much.
Body language. Anyway, have you written anything about mediation in your country? Papers, books, and so on. I will be extremely interested in reading them, because your explanation of the situation is very, very interesting. First. Second, mediation should be totally voluntary. I agree. We tried it in Italy. It didn't work at all. We must oblige to introduce mandatory mediation, or best to say, mandatory to first introduction meeting to mediation. And they started working. And second, the culture of mediation. All crucial points. And really, please, if you've written something, I will be very interested in reading them. And I would like more about mediation as a tradition, as a culture in your country, and what's really happening and how it's developing.
Yeah, but I think Yemi, what you need to do is on your blog. I think on your blog, I think you maybe need to take this up and start putting this out, because you're not. I don't think you're very active. You put that blog out, but you don't seem to be very active on it. I don't know why.
I think I'm getting very, very well challenged there. And Giovanni, I promise that over the next couple of weeks, starting in about a week from now, you should get more output from me on these matters. Yes.
Many thanks, because you told very, very interesting thing. For example, when people want to give to some other the responsible of managing the situation, it's really important. It's what really happens every time.
So what we'll do is, we will have conversations with Yemi, because today he's a little rushed, and I will not hold him back anymore. Otherwise, he's going to say that, why did you get me stuck? I'm being polite, but don't take it for granted. So thank you very much. And
Vikram, thank you very much for having me on this series.